On May the 15th, 1941, my mother wrote in her diary, "Most important day of my life, married. Will never forget it." And she never did. She was 23 and Bob, her husband, was just 19. Here they were starting out on a marriage that lasted for 65 years and a marriage that really was a true love story. They had got engaged in January of that year on my father's birthday, and it wasn't a very long engagement. 4 months later, here they were embarking out to get married, and it was wartime, and long engagements were not the thing. People might not be there this time next year or even this time next week. She didn't write in that diary was how the story of that day unfolded, and believe me, it is some story. So I hope you're ready to come on a ramble with me through the story of this wartime wedding. They both worked together at the sorting office, the main sorting office in Exeter, and they announced that they'd got engaged and had set a date for the wedding. One of their colleagues decided to start collecting for them, because in those days there was rationing and not much money around either. So he thought he would aim to make their important day a little bit special by at least having enough food for people and whatever else was needed for the wedding. Unfortunately, his goodwill didn't last very long, because when he'd accumulated whatever amount he had, he decided to skip with it. He left the building and was never seen again. So they don't know what happened to their wedding day collection, but now they were just with their own clothes and their corsage and the rail tickets that they needed, etc., but nothing for the frills and fancies. My father had chosen one of his friends from his teenage years, a fellow Teignmouth person, to be his best man. That man had joined the Navy not long before, and on the day before their wedding, they heard that he couldn't make it because, unfortunately, his ship had been sunk by a U-boat the week before and he had been killed. My mother had decided to choose one of her friends to also be a witness at her wedding. This friend worked nearby in the telephone exchange and shared a house with other girls who worked in the telephone exchange in Exeter. Exeter had been subject to bombing. This was May the 15th, they were going to get married. Exeter had been bombed on May the 4th, the 5th and the 6th. And I think at that point about 19 bombs had actually landed in Exeter. The real blitz of Exeter that it's known for, that all the history books record, didn't actually happen until 1942. This was 1941. So yes, the city had been attacked, but not many people had been affected. But unfortunately, the young woman that was going to be her witness was one of those young people. A home very near to their boarding house had been hit, and she had also been injured and was not able to attend their wedding as a witness. So on the big day, they arrive at the church in Exeter, the Roman Catholic church, and the two of them walk in. But this was wartime, and a lot of people were not around, and certainly her family and her parents could not have made the journey from South Wales to Teignmouth in Devon, but they were intending to make that journey later that day. After the ceremony, they were going to travel to Wales to visit her parents and all her family to help celebrate their nuptials. So the priest had the two of them in front of him and asked where the witnesses were. "You need two witnesses." And they explained what had happened and why They not only didn't have witnesses, they didn't even have a best man. And the priest said, well, the wedding can't go ahead without witnesses, so you're going to have to find some. There's a bus stop outside. Why not go out and ask people at the bus stop, would they be prepared to come in and be your witnesses? So they went out in all their wedding gear and talked to the people at the bus stop. And two people very kindly did step forward, put off what they were doing, came into the church with them and were witnesses. But they never got to, these people were complete strangers. They never got to know them. Can't remember, or I'm not sure if they even knew their names. But the wedding had gone ahead because these people had stepped in. So directly after the wedding, they were going to the train station to make their way up to Abercarn in the South Wales valleys. Now, the train station had also been affected by the bombing. It wasn't a direct hit at that point on the train station, but trains were disrupted, and the trains were being reserved for troops only on a restricted basis. So they turn up at the station. I'm not sure they even knew this, and they found it out when they got to the station. But the station was alive with troops, and there was my mother in all her wedding outfit and my father in his, both of them looking very happy to be travelling, and were told, no, you can't get on the train. Obviously very disappointed, and I don't know what made people change their minds. Maybe my mother started crying, I wouldn't be surprised. And in the end, they were taken pity on and they were told, okay, you can travel. So they get on the train. You can imagine this. She's 23, just got married, all in her wedding outfit, looking very beautiful. And in this train full of men who were themselves quite excited about where they were going and full of comments about, oh, it's your wedding night tonight. And more and more, getting more and more personal. And she, in the end, did get quite distressed. And my father went to find the guard. The guard came along and said, look, come with me. And they followed him down through the train, and he took them into the gloomy guard's van, which held all the luggage. It was very dirty, so full of suitcases and boxes and I think bicycles by the sound of it. And the guard said to them, you can stay here for the rest of the journey. No one will disturb you in here. And we terminate in Newport, so you'll be able to get off there. And he left them to it. So there they sat in all their finery, in amongst all the rubbish, the boxes, the suitcases, for the rest of the journey up to Newport. When they arrived in Newport, they then had to make their way up the valley to Abercarn. And I don't know if the buses were running, I assume they were, because they arrived in Abercarn. And my father always tells the story of they were walking up the road towards the village, and it looked like the whole village was coming to greet them, or were they coming to greet them? They all had their arms up in the air. And at first he wasn't really sure whether what was going to happen here. Were they going to throw something at them? Were they actually coming to meet them, or whatever? And he got a little bit, oh my goodness, what do I do? And then he saw them getting closer and closer and realized that they were all smiling, and what they'd got in their hands was rice to throw at them. So everything was okay. Mum met up with her parents, and everybody in that group would have been related to my mother in some way. First cousin, second cousin, third cousin. The whole village did seem to be interrelated. It wasn't a big place, and it was a very small tight mining community. And most of these people lived in the little miners' houses that had been built early in the I think it was 1843, 1848, that these houses had been built. specifically to accommodate the miners. They all lived in the street, mingled together, and really lived in each other's houses. So it was a proper community in the true sense of the word. So off they went to go to my grandparents' house to show them and relate to them what the wedding day had been like up to that point in time, and to celebrate with them. But before going into my grandparents' house, the neighbour came and said, no, 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 you can't go in there until you've been in to pay your respects to your childhood friend who passed away 2 days ago. And my mother didn't know anything about this, but this was the girl she'd lived next door to in her young life until the age of 15 and had been her friend. So this was some sad news. So they went into the house and there was her friend laid out in her coffin on the kitchen table. So before going in to celebrate, they had to come and view this deceased friend. And my mother took off her corsage and put it into the coffin with her friend. Obviously, she was upset, but this was her wedding day, and it was an unusual thing to have to do on your wedding day. But eventually, when they left that house, they did go into her parents' house and did get to chat to them and celebrate with them. Then later that day, they decided they would like some time on their own. So they went and for a walk up the mountain. And they had been up to the top of the mountain in January. And while they were sitting there, they had been witnesses to the bombing of Cardiff in the distance. They'd seen the planes coming over, the smoke rising. It was some way off, but they had actually viewed all this from the top of the mountain. So they revisited the top of the mountain and sat there and reminiscing about their day and about what they'd seen the previous time they were there. So not an uneventful wedding day. In fact, quite an unusual wedding day, I'd say, for most people. And she didn't record any of that in her diary. She just wrote, it was the most important day of her life. She got married and she must never forget it. They had a lifetime of stories, which is really what I'm doing today. I'm bringing that story out. But believe me, there are lots of lovely, lovely stories, and obviously some sad stories, some very poignant stories, and some very funny stories to come. So I hope you're going to keep with me, ramble on. I've called this channel Red Box Ramblings because my mother's diaries were all kept in a big red box and I have them at my house. And let's ramble together. Join me for the next one. If you've stayed to the end with this one, congratulations, you've got some stamina. And do please like and subscribe, and that will mean that you'll get a notification when I post the next story. So bye for now. Happy rambling.